Excelente, etcétera.
Thrill me.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast. I'm your host, Tim, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Steven. What's up, man? How's it going?
What's up, dude? Happy to be here. How you
Oh,
doing?
yeah. Same old shit, and I'm stoked to be here as well, as we are joined by returning guest of the show, Justin Pearson of 31G Records, as well as the bands The Locust, Dead Cross, Death Club, Planet B, Satanic Planet, and also one of the hosts of the Cult and Culture podcast. How's it going, man? Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's going. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Now, we're stoked to have you back. And of course, you've had a lot of stuff come out in the past few years since you've been on the show. But one of the coolest things, in my opinion, was the documentary that you're the subject of called Don't Fall in Love with Yourself. Do you mind just letting the people know about that and where they can find it as well? If you have anything else you want to promote that's coming up, in the second half of the year.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. John Nix is the director of the film. It came out on Turnstile Films and I don't know, but technically maybe last year, I guess. It's weird to have a film about me, but luckily it kind of mutated into like a bigger picture about like 31G and a lot of the bands that are part of the label. I think it should have been about Gabe Serbian and with considering his passing and stuff. Also, he's easily the coolest part of that documentary, in my opinion. So, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird that there's a film about me and that exists, I guess. But you can get it's streaming everywhere. It's free on Tubi right now, I think. But you can get it everywhere. If you go to the YouTube trailer, there's like a bunch of links for everywhere to check it out.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
And did you have anything else coming up with any of your projects or anything that, under the label that you want to promote for the second half of the year?
Yeah, there's all kinds of shit. Well, Def Club's releasing an album, co-releasing an album with 31G and another label that I don't know when this is gonna premiere. It hasn't been announced yet. So yeah, we're working on a new album. It's done. So we have a new album, and then man, I'm working on all kinds of shit. Planet B's working on. We're just starting to work on a new album, and this hasn't been announced yet, but Johnny Whitney from the Blood Brothers is going to be joining the band for the album. So he's going to be
Oh,
singing
shit.
with me on it. He's from the Blood Brothers. And then Satanic Planet is almost done with an album, which seems like a pretty gnarly time for that to come out with all things considered in the US.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, Things are pretty grim
Yeah.
with the Satanic Temple getting bombed and stuff like that. So I'm sure it's going to be even worse. And then yeah, 31G has a bunch of shit coming out. Fuck Money LP, this band called Guck from Los Angeles. That's awesome. Their LP. We're gonna be doing an all leather anthology. I don't know. There's a bunch of shit. Yeah, always stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Never
Nah,
not busy.
right.
Yeah, a little bit too much.
I know you're one of the intros I feared doing. I was like, fucking all those bands I got to name as well as
I don't want to name them.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, they're easy to remember because, they're all awesome and shit like that. But to kind of move on, to kind of segue into the genre stuff, last time I asked about your work with Aja Argento, but just recently I watched Cecil B. Demented for the first time and noticed that some Locust tracks were on the soundtrack. What led to you, having some songs on John Waters films? And I mean, I know he's a fan of, punk and hardcore, so I'm sure, he's a fan of the music itself anyways, but.
Yeah, that was a weird one. I think we had a mutual friend at the time of that record or that movie being made, and he like his people reached out and they licensed two songs from GSL. And yeah, it was insane to be in that film, like on the soundtrack. And then that kind of opened up into like a wider relationship that I've had with him. I mean, I consider him a good friend. I see him every time he comes through San Diego, and he comes and sees us whenever I go through Baltimore and so on, or where New York or wherever he's at the time. But yeah, it's John Waters, man. It's like the fucking coolest legend of all. And then we've done like things like Def Club played like an event in Southern California that he did like where he showed Crybaby and like did a discussion about it and stuff. So that was cool to kind of partake in like larger John Waters type things. So yeah, the dude's awesome. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah. I've got a funny story actually. I don't know if it's really funny, but um a I guess it was when you guys were touring with like New Erections and you guys were playing a show at the Auto Bar in Baltimore. And a bunch of my friends, we kind of got split up in the crowd and, they're watching. I kept looking over at them and they kept like pointing at me. And I just was like, yeah, this show's sick. Like, this is awesome. And they kept just like pointing and I was like, didn't know what they were talking about. And I guess during y'all's set, they came up to me afterwards and they were like, dude, you were standing next to John Waters the entire set. And I just had no clue he was like right
Yeah.
behind me. So yeah.
Yeah. He said some he said a lot of interesting things to me over the years, but the compliments about like the band, the Locust playing there was pretty interesting. The first time we played that in Baltimore, he came out to the Auto Bar. He was like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, and I might not be saying it, I might not be delivering it the
Sure.
right way, so I might be doing it justice, but like you have to kind of think of it coming from him. But he was like, that was fantastic. There's all these young girls that look like they're 14 years old, strung out on heroin up front. That's you're doing great. I was just like, thanks. Like fuck, I guess
Ah,
it's a compliment. And then some girls played there, the band, some girls played there, and he came out and he we were hanging out by the bar. It was like one of the incarnations of the venue where it had a photo booth and people kept coming up while we were talking, asking if they would take a photo with him in the photo booth, and he kept saying no. Maybe not kept, but like two or three people, and he said no. And then this one woman came up and she asked, and he said yes, and they did it. And I was like, I don't understand, like why her? So like if I was saying this from my own perspective, I'd be getting canceled. But it's John Waters, and so he said it. He was like, he came back, and I was like, why'd you pick her out of all those people? Because at least two or three other people asked you. And he goes, well, because she's a bigger girl, and I figured like she's probably cooler, like saying that she was like a little larger and whatever. And I was like, what a fucking weird thing, to
Hell
pull
yeah.
out. Like he passed on to all the other people, and all of a sudden it was just like no hesitation, said yes to her. And I think like in context, maybe she did sort of look like to me, I guess, Ricky Lake from Hairspray. Like she kind of like
Uh,
done up cool like that and shit. And I
sure.
think that like she had a vibe. But yeah, so the things that he says and does are pretty bizarre. Yeah, I've got tons of stories, but we could move on from him.
Hell yeah. No, he seems like an awesome guy. And like you said, he's said a bunch of weird shit over the years. I'm sure like I've watched a few interviews, where he's asked about like some of the crazy stuff he's done. And instead of responding like, in a way of like, oh, I was young, he's just like jumps full head in, like when they talk about the chicken scene from Pink Flamingos and stuff, he's like, oh, made it famous, you know what I mean? So it's like dude does not give a fuck. But
Yeah.
no, hell yeah. But when it comes to like horror films and stuff like that, which, his films aren't really necessarily horror, but they're genre and, loved by horror fans and stuff, exploitation stuff. But what this is your second time on the show, so you've already been asked like what's your favorite, what was your relationship with them growing up, but what's some of your favorite horror sequels of all time?
Okay, so it's a loaded question in a sense because I think I struggle with stuff where there's like sequels or prequels. I feel like the way that like film has gone to me and I think people have made this like sort of franchise element out of it as like the expected thing, and that's fine, but I think that like it's interesting when you see a film that kind of doesn't end. You're like, oh, leaves you hanging for the next episode, and I feel it personally like, that's kind of a bummer, like with the I don't know, directing or filmmaking. So I struggle with trying to say like, oh, I like these follow-up pieces that are attached to it. So with that being said, I have two in mind, and then I thought of a third one, and I think they all kind of have this like sort of each one has like a sort of it has a relevant like thing behind it. So first one, obviously, I think the best horror film, I might have said this the first time, was the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So
Huh.
that's awesome. Part two came out at an odd time for me in life, and it kind of hit hard because I like the fact that it was very campy, but also like super brutal, and it had the Cramps on the soundtrack. It actually has a killer soundtrack. So um, that kind of resonated with me. And then I don't know. I think that the fact that like I was whatever age I was at the time, I was always been into horror movies as a kid, but like it was less like scary and more just like funny. And I think that one like kind of played into that with the humor aspect of it. So that would be my Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is like my favorite sequel, hands down, to in like the horror genre. So there's that. I have two other ones, and I can keep talking if you want, but we can rip on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for a minute if you guys want.
Well, that's my favorite horror sequel as well, and I know Steven, you got to enjoy it because
Oh
your
yeah, it's
your
so
company did,
good.
yeah, some awesome Chop Top shirts. So he does Toxic Coffin as well, and they did a Chop Top like record store shirt, which was pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the second film does such a cool job like expanding on like characters just being free and crazy. Like yeah, Chop Top is like a prime example. Uh and so yeah, I don't know. It just feels less pressure. I feel like he went into it like, yeah, I'm just gonna make this a fun film and just like jump the shark and everything. And like I already made a terrifying film, so why not make just like something that's going to be a cult classic, I guess. I don't know if people go into directing a movie hoping it's a cult classic, but you know, so
Yeah, I mean, well, the bar was high, so it's like, how do you make a sequel that's gonna be like that? You have to kind of do something that's adjacent, that's its own thing, which it
mhm.
was, and that's one of the things why like I kind of appreciated that. I'm always like, I've watched that movie probably 1,000 times, but I always find little weird things where I'm like, that's just kind of dumb, or like, why'd they do that, or like, whatever. But it's not me to make it, or to I'm just like I'm just one of the many critics. But I think overall, it's a solid sequel to the genre for sure. It definitely adds to it, to like the whole storyline.
yeah, and it did the perfect thing of fitting in with the times because like the first movie came out in the early 70s and felt raw and felt very like straightforward in 70s. And even Toby Hooper has came out and said that there's some dark humor in there and you can see it when you watching the original film, but it doesn't feel like the humor that like the campy humor that comes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2,
Yeah.
which dropped, mid 80s when we had Evil Dead 2 coming out, Return of the Living Dead and all these other fun campy films. So it did a great job of like almost chameleon in itself with I tried to make that a verb, it didn't work, or it didn't work. And but it did a good job of like fitting in with what was popular for the decade. So now he made two movies in the same franchise, but one's one of the best films of the 70s and one's one of the best horror films, at least of the 80s. So
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's funny because you just touched upon the other two that I was gonna say, Evil Dead 2 and Return of the Living Dead. Also, I think are substantially great sequels.
oh yeah.
But I think with Evil Dead 2 is weird because it feels like just a better version of Evil Dead 1.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the whole. I mean, I probably should have done a little bit more like a bit more of a deep dive into that and investigated what the deal was because it just seems like they just did the same film again but better,
I think
which
that
I
is
guess.
what it was pretty much because I think Sam Raimi, like even before the first Evil Dead, he had like a like kind of like a student film, like really, really, really like amateur film that he put out. I can't remember what it was called. And then he did Evil Dead, which was basically like a rehashing of that. And then I think because he was able to get a bigger budget for the second one, he was like, oh shit, let me fix the things from, Evil Dead 1. And he kind of does that in like the first 15 minutes of the film and then, takes it from there. So it's kind of cool that he didn't really care to like make it a new story. He's just like, nah,
No,
I'm just gonna keep polishing what I wanted to do. So
that's an interesting way to look at it. So I guess then, yeah, we should just give him all the credit he deserves because he did a fucking great job. And I that's an interesting way to look at it because I look at it at like, I don't know, music and stuff too. Like I could record a better record 10 years, 15 years later with a different budget and with technology and stuff like that, or different players or whatever, or even
mhm.
myself being like a little bit more uh figure out what I'm doing. So yeah, that's an interesting point to make, I suppose. And then the other one would be Return of the Living Dead. I think is it's sort of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre to 1 to 2. It's just like it was like a complete shift and probably I mean, I don't know if I would even say it's like a horror movie necessarily. It seems like it's more comedy than horror, but it's the way that Return of the Living Dead was, again, killer soundtrack, bunch of awesome bands, cramps around that one again. They just nailed it, and it was so bizarre and well done. And I don't know, like I guess because it had like the whole like punk angle to it and stuff, it really resonated, especially when it came out in the 80s. I don't know, for me at least. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's
that
one of
was
the first like meta horror movies, like in a way, because it uses Night of the Living Dead, it treats it like a film that was based on a true event. So it's like, that like you can use that film as sort of a basis, but it's not all the facts because, they said it was based on the true event. So it's like, and so it's cool that, it's like meta in a way that was like, before even people knew really what meta was, so and
Mm.
it's not in the way of parody either, like it pokes fun at that film, but it doesn't do it in a way that becomes like Saturday the 14th or what is it, Transylvania 56,000 or
Yeah.
5 6,000 or whatever it is. But
Yeah. That's funny. I think it is good how I mean, because it is very comical and the acting is superior in that film. So I think that they lucked out with that, with the angle that they took because, obviously Return of the Living Dead or sorry, Night of the Living Dead was great and it was such a iconic film. So like they completely went a different direction, which is awesome.
you know No, and there's so many iconic scenes in Return of the Living Dead from, the I could feel myself rot to, the
Mhm.
trash dancing naked or, to even the tar man, yelling out brains. Like it's crazy that most people like when they think of zombies, like you can tell some random person, pretend to be a zombie and they might call out brains, but they won't know it's from that movie or that
Mm.
that's and then the lore behind it and stuff. So and then also I just love the whole lore created behind they eat people because it like helps their pain, like eases their pain. It makes it so much darker, like on
Yeah.
top of this comedy movie. So
And also the intellect with the zombies, like how he says send more cops, like the fact that they like know, that they're
Ah,
conscious to able to like get what they need is I think it's a brilliant move.
you know, oh yeah,
yeah, I liked what you said earlier, though, when asked about the sequels and like kind of touching on like the whole franchise thing. Because I do feel like that's where sequels like get drugged on for forever into monotony. Because like, how many Scream movies do we have now? How many like Halloween movies? And now I feel like those franchises don't even they get so wrapped up in trying to make nods to like either the original or callbacks and do like fanfare that it's hard for those movies to succeed because it's just a rewriting of kind of the same thing. So that the films that you like as sequels, like it's kind of the same thing that I'm into as far as like that just because they were different and they didn't try to just grab the cash for it, or maybe they were, but so
Yeah, there's some things that are interesting though, because you think about like they should have stopped it after Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part Two, and then there's all this bullshit that came out when they like started doing these like, Part Three was pretty lame, I think, and then they redid them, and I get it, the redoing it makes it's sort of like I guess what they did with Evil Dead, I suppose, but it just I don't know, I feel like it just you shouldn't touch it, and but we see it in cinema everywhere. Like, I mean, Star Wars is a perfect example. Like, they should just fucking,
sure.
stopped, and now it's just like, it is a cash grab. And I watch all that crap too. And I'm like, this fucking sucks. But the only thing that like really maybe was, I don't want to use the word successful, but like made sense is the Friday the 13th franchise because it was so
Mm,
ridiculous and you kept going and it was I don't know but like I also lost touch too like when he went to outer space I was like I'm not gonna watch this shit but I think that like it becomes like a I don't know like a marketing thing
mm,
more than uh maybe a cinematography thing or like making film like making a good film it's more just like oh let's put out another thing to make more money and so on and so forth and then like the franchise element of selling like stuff like
sure.
whatever.
I mean,
um
look how huge Freddy exploded after, the original. And then, I kind of give that an exception because I felt like Freddy became more than the first one because he leaned into Robert Englund as an actor and like being goofy and silly. And, you know, I don't know if we would have had that version of Freddy if it wasn't for them, making the sequels and,
yeah
so, but yeah.
that actually like really stood out to me in that Freddy versus Jason film because
Mhm.
I think they went like a really cool route with Jason where he was just like so fucking brutal. And then Freddy was just stupid. Like all of his jokes are just like, dude, you're kind of lame. Just go fuck yourself. Like, like just like the slapstick, like
Sure.
one-liners.
he
I
said,
don't know.
"Got your nose," and fucking grabs her nose.
I don't know. I mean, I get what they're trying to do, but
Mm,
like in contrast to Jason, who was just super brutal, I was more into that. I think it made more sense.
sure.
But again, like I'm into like the merging of the I don't know, whatever universes or whatever you want to call
Mm,
it. So
No, but kind of piggyback off of things you guys have both mentioned, it's the best sequels are the ones that are passion projects by these people that created the franchise to begin with. With Evil Dead
sure.
2, he was doing Evil Dead 2 because he wanted to make the sequel, but it only has the stuff from Evil Dead 1 attached because he couldn't, just use footage or whatever because of studio stuff. But and of course, and he wanted to but that's one thing is he did such a good job of remaking that stuff from the first film and turning it into like a 30-minute segment without losing so much of the story. And so it just shows how much Sam Raimi loved the story and the character of Ash and wanted to carry that on. And then same thing with Texas Chainsaw. I mean, that was what, 12 years later when it dropped, so
yeah,
you could tell it wasn't a studio forcing him to do it. And if a studio did ask him, hey, would you ever want to do this again, he must have had an idea that made him like want to do it, because he didn't return again for, I'm sure if they asked, yeah, I'm sure they asked him to come back for three, and he was probably like, no, two was good enough. Like
yeah.
we killed everybody at the end of two. What the fuck you need? What do you mean? Like, so no, I
Well,
know.
they did have that scene where she was like on that mountain, like spinning around with the chainsaw, and that was, kind of like I could have done without that part.
Mm.
But I think that the Evil Dead franchise was interesting where they jumped to Army of Darkness because that's another like huge. That film's pretty sick too, and it just goes like berserk. It was kind of like Time Bandits or something.
Yeah,
But
I love that
like,
movie. Hell yeah.
yeah, but it was like Army of Darkness was like sick. You're just like, oh, this
Mm.
is this is like next level bizarre shit. It was out of the like normal, I guess, like lane that you would expect it to have been going in. And I think that's cool. And I suppose a lot of the other directors tried to do that, or I guess the directors changed. I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. Anyhow, sequels
Yeah.
can be tricky.
Yeah, I wonder how, yeah, because there's the factor of like, if a film is successful, how much pressure are they under from the studios to like, or the producers that are backing, I mean, I'm sure you could probably relate to that as a musician, like when you guys have had to do like follow-up albums, like, I mean, I guess with it being 31G, have you guys had to like go under that kind of pressure, or is it the freedom to like just make what you guys want, you know?
Yeah, I mean, with the stuff I do or whatever, a part
Sure.
it's do whatever the fuck you want. But again, like it's an interesting thing because with the Locust, it was interesting because I constantly hear people being like, the first record was the best. And you're like, you're fucking lame, dude, because that was just like muddied garbage. I mean, it was fine for what it was, but like I'm talking about like a self-titled record that was
Sure,
on.
totally. Where it's more
And
just like straight up power violence.
yeah, and it's like everyone just incohesively just yelling, and like you can't hear any of the drums. And um even when we went back and remixed some of that stuff, it was like, whoa, some of us were not in tune, or we were like not playing the right note and
Mhm.
stuff. So, like moving on from that, to Plague Soundscapes, and then even New Erections, like we constantly were trying to like evolve and create something new, not like recreate the thing that happened before. And it's weird because
Mhm.
I'll say it for a lot of people, like, you look at like I don't know, like for the argument's sake, like Rolling Stones, they're gonna always play the same fucking hits, and like no one wants to hear the Steel Wheels song or whatever it is that they,
Mhm.
like they're just like, so it kind of sucks, but like I give them credit or whoever because they're just like, no, we want to make a new record, and maybe and hopefully they like it. I mean, for
Sure.
me, like moving through the lineage of the Locust releases, I was, and we all were just like really way more into the new stuff.
Mhm.
And I think that serves or says something in itself. Like if you're happy with what you're doing and doing what you want to do for yourself, not to make money. And I think that like going back to the film stuff, I mean, I'm pretty sure like you said, there was no pressure from the studio to make Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. They just wanted to do it. I think that's fucking cool.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of freedom there, and I think that shows. And then you have, artistic creativity breeds, I don't know, like, or inspires other things to happen, which I feel that, there was that weird shift in horror to become like, to incorporate comedy or humor or whatever. So yeah.
No, it's like I don't know if you guys saw the announcement. I think it was just yesterday, or the day before, but the Talk to Me guys, which I don't know if you saw that movie, Justin, 'cause I think it came out after our last conversation. But Michael and Danny Filippo, they're a couple of twins that went from being YouTube stars to making horror movies, and they made Talk to Me, which was a huge success. And they just well, Bring Her Back comes out. It'll be out by the time this episode drops, but it comes out in like 2 weeks from the time we're recording. But so they did Talk to Me, and immediately got announced for doing Talk to Me 2. But then they put out Bring Her Back, and now they have a documentary coming out that's like a deathmatch wrestling documentary. And they straight up said when asked about like what they're doing next, they're like, "Well, we're finishing up a documentary about deathmatch wrestling, and then we have another original horror movie we're gonna do before we do Talk to Me too, because we don't want to just jump right back into it." And they even said that they have two ideas for Talk to Me too that they're picking between, because they pretty much said that they're just revisiting the universe of the film, because it's pretty much about a group of people that grab a hand and can let themselves become possessed, and it kind of like plays as like a party drug, because a bunch of friends do it around each other and stuff. And it's a really fun concept. I definitely recommend it. But so they're pretty much just using that universe. It sounds like they're not returning to the same characters. So they're like, we can go here in the world, or we can go here in the world. So they already even have the ideas, but the fact that they're not just like, fuck it, let's force it back and cash in
Yeah.
on the money. They're like, let's do some stuff like, because even Black Phone, the movie The Black Phone came out at about the same time, and Black Phone 2 comes out next year. And I'm a little excited for that because again, it seems like Scott Derrickson could have done whatever he wanted, and he actually like, had a true idea for Black Phone 2. Instead of the studio being like, "Hey, do you think you could do a Black Phone 2?" Because the way that movie ended, it didn't end on any kind of cliffhanger. It's like felt pretty tied up with a bow. You know what I mean? So, no, it's pretty cool to see these directors like put out these original IPs and then care about them enough to return to them in that same form as like Sam Raimi with Evil Dead 2, or Toby Hooper with Texas Chainsaw, and actually giving it that break and stuff and that breathing time. So.
But I wonder like about um sort of like the Texas or sorry, Toxic Avenger came out and now they're doing like the reboot or whatever. I wonder wonder what the like where that would fit into this because that's not a sequel, but it's kind of like borrowing from the whole original, there's like what how five, six, however many original Toxic Avengers. So you have this like whole
Sure.
storyline you can make into one new film. So I wonder how that translates as far as like sequels go. I like it'll be cool to see something like that, but at the same time, it's like you should just probably come up with like a new story. That's what I would say. Again, going back to the band thing, it's like losing band members and all of a sudden like the band's going on and there's no original members in it anymore, so it's I guess it's similar to
Sure.
that,
Yeah.
maybe.
With the reboot stuff, it's always kind of tricky for me because especially when you have such close ties to a certain film. But, I guess the lens that I try to look at it is like, this movie maybe isn't for me. Maybe it's for like a younger generation to discover it in a different light or whatever. Um, but I do have that like crotchety old guy, like it's not the same, like you really should. And then I feel like the classic like, same thing as like shows like you should have seen this band back in the day,
Yeah.
like
Well,
so
yeah,
so I get
but a
that for
good
sure.
a good point to that is like you can't make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre again. Like you
Yeah,
can't do
true.
that. You try to make it retro and make it like, gritty or whatever, but it will not happen. And I think that's cool. And same with bands. Like you can't,
Mm,
people try to make, I don't know, Infest again. It's like Infest just did it at that time, or Crossed Out or something, whatever, like specific kind of genre of music. Like just let it be, leave it
sure.
as it is, and do something new. Like you can be inspired by it, but don't try to replicate it. And so I don't know. It's interesting when people try to do that. So I feel like maybe the Toxic Avenger is like such a crazy. It seems. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, the new one, but it just seems so insanely different. That we're like it kind of stands on its own. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited for it just to see how absurd it is. Just because also just it's hard to imagine any film being remade from like a trauma film that's already like those were the movies that I watched like in college or in high school where I was like, what the fuck is all
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
shit?
Yeah.
Like so, but
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course you never know, like one that kind of does what you were mentioning, Justin, with Friday the 13th, that remake. It uses part one, two, three, and four and shoves them all into one movie. And Toxic Avenger coming after all these other sequels kind of has the same opportunity to do that with characters like
Mhm.
Sergeant Kabuki Man that didn't come in until, Citizen Toxie or whatever, and all these other characters. Because by the end of the movies, it was almost like a Trauma Avengers fucking thing, and then with like all these different characters. So no, it's wild. I'm excited for it because I am excited to see how they translate trauma for the masses because they are,
Yeah.
but I guess they're trying to say it's not for the masses, as it kind of got shoved down and Cineverse picked it up and this and that. But I've heard many people say that it is gorier than like your average horror film these days and like crazier, but it is not. It's still not like trauma levels, which makes sense. But and I'm mostly just excited for it because Macon Blair is the guy that did it is such a cool guy. He was in both Jeremy Saulnier's films, Green Room and Blue Ruin, and then he also did a couple films of his own for Netflix that were really good. So
And isn't Elijah Wood in the new
yeah,
I feel like I remember seeing clips or photos of his character. He looks like the fucking penguin from the
yeah,
90s Batman. But
Teenage Penguin, pretty much.
yeah.
Oh yeah. No, and then did you have any more sequel related questions, Stephen? Before I know you had the hypothetical one, but we could save that for the end. But
Yeah. No, not anything really specific. I mean, I was gonna ask how was it doing like the Swing Kids reunion and stuff like that. Like that was really cool to see. Like speaking on sequels, if you will. But like it was cool to see like clips from the show and like it was rad to see Johnny Whitney like playing with you guys and stuff.
Mhm.
So like yeah, I'm all for it, So
Mhm.
but
The reunion thing's weird. I'm not a fan of it, and
okay. Yeah.
and so when the idea was brought to me, it was like the whole thing was we were going to play a show in San Diego for our bass player John Brady's 50th birthday, and
Mhm.
I was like, I'm gonna say yeah because Jose is gonna say no, and I don't want to be the person saying no to that, And so I said yes, and then Jose said yes, and I was like, fuck, man, now we have to do this thing. And it was kind of weird because I love everyone in that band so
Mm,
much, and I like the music, but it's a hard one because Eric Allen, who is the original guitar player, had passed away,
mm.
and so that's a thing that's difficult for me.
Sure.
But I think also like I'm the worst part of the band. I'm the weak link musically in that band, vocally and lyrically, and I'm not trying to. I'm just being honest. I wasn't great. So that's hard for me. But when we got back together and we're like hanging out and rehearsing and stuff, it was fun and I felt good about it. And so we played the one show in San Diego and then decided to do two more. And the
Mhm.
Berkeley one was bizarre as fuck. It was like at a rock climbing gym and it was outside and it felt really weird in the day
Oh,
to play.
interesting.
Yeah, but we did it and it was cool. And then the next show after that was Los Angeles, and that was the
Mm,
one that like felt real and right. It was like a
sure.
proper show. It was all ages, and it was just wild and it felt rad. And we're actually playing in a few weeks in DC for Positive Force DC's 40th anniversary. Um,
Sick.
so that's something that's kind of crazy too, which I wasn't like expecting to happen, like to have to be asked to play something of that stature. Like there's
Mhm.
members of Fugazi and playing, and it just seems like kind of wild. And so there's like this perception, like, oh, you're back at it, you're gonna do
Mhm.
it, and like I'm like, dude, we can't tour as a band, and like no one cares enough to pay for us to like fly or whatever. So like
Sure.
things we're doing are very limited, and we're not going to write new music, and we only have 11 songs, it's like, or I guess it's 11 songs. So it's like you get booked to play some like festival or just a show where they're just like, we expect you to play for 45 minutes or an hour, and you're like, yeah, it's not going to happen. It's just weird. So the reunion
Sure.
thing's strange. Good for the other bands that somehow like won that like weird lottery or whatever it is. But like for me, it's just like I'd rather focus on the future or new stuff and go from there.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like you get if because you don't want to get stuck in that like constant cycle of just like redoing, like kind of like you said with working on like Locust albums, like you want to evolve, you want to play something new, something that you're inspired by, and if you're just rinse and repeat of the same old thing, then it's hard to like stay in that like, creative state that you want to be in. So,
Well, yeah, but also like that's a good example because I need to make sure like for me personally, like if we're gonna do this, it has to be better than it's ever been. And
Mhm.
right before Swing Kids, like we didn't really break up, but like when we stopped playing, mainly because Jose moved away, but Jimmy Lavelle joined the band as a second guitar player, and it was we played like I don't know maybe 3 or 4 shows with Jimmy and Eric, and I was like, this is what we should have been doing all the time. It was way more gnarlier, and I had started to become better at singing and so on and so forth, and then we just stopped. So now that we're back, without Eric, we have Nathan Joyner playing second guitar. So there's 2 guitars, and we have been trying to play with horn players. And I think everyone's musicianship is better, and it just makes it for a better experience than if someone was to have caught it, in
Mhm.
the late 90s. So I just need to make sure that it's not like garbage.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad it worked out. And I know what you mean. Sometimes you get reserved for stuff like that, but it does that question did fit perfectly though, because it's like a reboot with the reunions.
Mhm.
But no, but speaking of like, new stuff and everything like that, have you seen any horror films in the past like year or so that you really enjoyed? Because it's been about a year or so that since you've been on the show, and they don't have to be new films, they could just be recent or first time watches of like an old horror film as well.
I don't know because I've been so thrashed lately with everything. So I mean I did watch a film that I was working on a score for, and that was cool, but somehow I don't want to talk too much shit. We had the directors kind of it was they just treated us kind of rudely, and so
Yeah.
we're not doing it. But that was cool to see that. No one it's not even out yet, and I'm not we're not part of it, or it was a Planet B thing that we were doing the score for. So that I just shit the bed on that answer. I don't know, like trying to think what have I seen lately? I don't know. I feel like
No.
I've seen a bunch of movies, but I can't. I'm drawing a blank right now.
No, no, I do the same thing. Sometimes I'll have like a film that I watch and love, and 2 weeks later, somebody will be like, "What's some good horror films to watch?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I don't know." Like,
Yeah.
immediately my mind goes to watch The Shining. It's great. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything like on your radar that you've been potentially excited to see that you can think of, or
It's funny. I'm supposed to go see this film tonight, and I fucking can't remember what it's called. But everyone's like, you gotta see it. You gotta see it. It's like it's driving me crazy because I wish I knew what it was called. I don't know. Yeah. Well, I think I shit the bed with that one too.
Sinners.
Um,
Is this?
oh yeah, Sinners. That's the one. Everyone was like, you
oh,
gotta
hell
see it.
yeah.
You gotta see it. I'm like, all right. It's funny when people say that because I'm like, I trust your opinion. I'm like, your opinion fucking sucks. So I'm like, I don't know. And so like, I'm not sure where I'm at with that, and I don't know anything about it. So everyone's like, you got to go. So I think that's gonna happen tonight, and I have both sides of the opinion spectrum to be like, well, fuck, I have no idea if it's gonna be good or bad. So we'll see.
I think that's a good because I've seen it twice now.
Okay.
And I think that's a good caliber of probably what to expect because as a hardcore horror fan, like I love that movie, but then also I have a bunch of friends that are like, I hate scary movies, like I can't
Uh,
handle them, but
yeah.
also like this movie. Um, we did a podcast with some friends about it, and like I kind of mentioned like this feels more than just like a horror film or like a
Yeah.
genre film, like it. So I hope you like it. I thought it was pretty rad.
Yeah. What was the one that came out with like Demi Moore
The Substance.
Substance? I thought that was great, but I don't know if that's really horror movie-ish. Like the end seemed like some kind of trauma thing. Like it seems so but so I don't know. I guess it is horror. I thought that was a really good film, really well done. There was a lot of social commentary, obviously, in there
Oh
that you
yeah.
could take away, which I guess a lot of horror movies do have that. But yeah, I thought that was a killer movie if that fits into it. But that might have been more than a year ago at this point. So
Oh no, 100%. That was last year. That's
yeah,
definitely my favorite movie of like the past 5 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
that it was killer. I think acting, cinematography, the creative elements of it, like it was everything. And again, like the shift at the end where it just went like off the rails, I thought was part of me was like, whoa, fuck, this movie like could have kind of kept it in like the realm of reality and just like it just went like
Mhm.
way the fuck out there, which is cool. But yeah, I like that. I like that film a lot. That was great.
Oh yeah, no, that was my favorite of 2024 as well. And then and I had the makeup effects artist on the show just because at the time it was like starting to pop off. So I was like, let me
Mhm.
find him before his name gets out there.
Yeah.
And then he won an Oscar, so now I'm sure it's hard to get him on the show. But
Yeah. Well,
uh,
congratulations on that. That's rad.
right, no, they definitely deserved it too. Like you said, that ending scene is something out of Trauma, but like on, that that was kind of like one of the first things that I feel like the mass like made it to the masses that was very Trauma-esque, like that gore like ending with the everything that happens. So
Yeah. It's totally
And
absurd.
what was the story with that film too? Because wasn't it originally, was it Sony that was trying to work with them and
I
they
think
didn't really,
so.
yeah. And then what is it? Moby? Is that how you pronounce it?
Movie or movie, yeah.
Yeah, like an independent, like, small film distributor, acquired it. So it was cool to see that they could identify and see like how important the creative direction was for it and still like move forward versus that film having to get like watered down and like we can't make a movie about this, because
Yeah.
it does get crazy as shit. So,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a disservice to any kind of art is just like worrying about the general public, absorbing it. I don't know. I feel like it just limits it. I think people are capable, and especially now in this modern day, like even if you want to take it to like a larger perspective of like politics and stuff, like everything's fucking insane. Like you totally should have shit like the substance in everything because like look at regular actual real life. It's just as
oh
fucking
yeah.
absurd. So there's that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no doubt. No, this probably sounds corny as hell, but like, I mean, I feel like you're a living example of like pushing those boundaries and like all of my best friends that I have today, like we played in bands and stuff like that in high school and it was stuff that was coming out from like 31G because you guys didn't give a fuck like what you guys were doing. It was purely just how you wanted to do it. So it made us feel like, oh yeah, I don't have to like fit into like a traditional like beat down hardcore music or whatever was popular at the time like metalcore and screamo and shit like that and like it totally like opened our mind to like yeah let's just be fun and weird and like no pressure on yourself and then I think in that it just made us feel more comfortable like growing up so as a teenager that was like cool to see so yeah definitely thanks for putting that energy out there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, as unsuccessful, I guess, monetarily as the label and most of my bands have been, like that kind of comment is where the value or the wealth is in the stuff that we've all done. And I think like a lot of it had to do with like the way San Diego is. And when we were growing up as kids, going to a show, it was just like a hodgepodge of stuff. And so you could take certain elements from things and make something new and creative. And that's why, I mean, you look at like, I don't know, like Unbroken is a good example. They
Sure.
sounded like, Slayer and they looked like Morrissey and they were fucking weird straight edge band. And like
Mhm.
that's cooler than every other straight edge band. Or like Dry Like Jehu. That was a weird product of I don't even know what, and like I think
Sure.
or Crash Worship or even like Antioch Arrow and stuff. I think everyone had the ability to kind of make something that was like slightly skewed, but like skewed enough to where you're like, that's fucking weird shit. And like,
Mhm.
and it had value in it. And granted, a lot of times it took a minute for it to become recognized. I mean, fuck, people hated the Locust for so long, and now that we're gone, I feel like maybe people care, but I'm glad that people care at all, because there's millions of things that come out in this world, especially with songs. There's 200,000 new songs
Yeah.
that come out a day now, which is just like an insane amount of stuff. So finding that weirdness in it or the uniqueness in it is pretty hard to do. And I guess the same as with films. I mean,
Mhm.
especially now with streaming services, there's so much shit happening and I again it's like overwhelming, I'm like I'm gonna quit
Mhm.
watching or looking because it's just so much stuff. So
Yeah.
uh,
I've almost stopped watching series, like TV series, and only watch movies because there's so much like the wife and I just started Righteous Gemstones after it's over with because we're like, okay, now that we know we can watch it and only have to watch 4 seasons, 9 episodes a season, it looks hilarious, we're gonna watch it. But before it was like I don't want to commit to something that might end up being 10 seasons, like especially when I'm already trying to watch, all these horror movies, to keep up with the podcast in case somebody brings them up, and then just because I love them too, not only, just for the podcast, but so it's like when I get that free time and having a kid around, I can only, that's also limits the stuff that I can watch. So because I can't just throw on I mean I can throw on Terrifier, but it might change my I might cut 7 years off my life one day if he decides to take after art. But no, so it's no, I agree 100% though. But like you said earlier, the horror movies are a good, like they're a good escape from the real horrors. You know what I mean? So it's nice to have like all that stuff around. But
Yeah, I think that well, my problem with series is like when was a series happening and they'll just devote a whole episode to it, to like this prequel backstory piece. I'm like, I
Oh
mean, I
God, I
get it,
hate
but then
that
it's
so
like,
much.
God,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the episode before that was a cliffhanger, and you're like, what's gonna happen? And then you have to go through an episode of like this happened, 100 years ago or whatever the fuck it is. And you're just like, damn it. So, and it is a lot of, it's like time consuming. It's like sitting down and watching a movie that's like, 40 hours long or whatever, depending on how many seasons it is. So
Mhm.
I don't know. There's that. But I would shit, what was I gonna say about you? You made this comment about so like I think we might have talked about this the first time, but you brought up Green Room, and I think that that was a cool horror movie that like was definitely based in reality. And if we did talk about it on this podcast before, I think I just picked it apart saying that there was no way that a punk band would play a Nazi skinhead festival and do Nazi punks fuck off and not die right away. But I
Yeah,
think that like that gave me a lot of hope in like filmmaking. And I think that now is the time where people should make shit that's like, pretty brutal, but also socially righteous. Like, I mean, there's I don't want to say too much stuff because then I'll get on like a watch list or whatever, but like there's a lot of stuff that people can make films about right now that would just be so badass and be very inspiring. I mean, yeah, I don't want to say too much because I do worry about who is getting in trouble now in the arts for
sure.
doing things. But I think that people like have I think the door has been opened to like kind of go at it and like make a horror movie about Congress or
yeah,
some I don't know whatever and like and give it to them. So yeah.
it's just like
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in the next like 5 or so years. I mean, shit, even what's his face? Ari Aster that did Midsummer and stuff, like his next movie coming out looks like it's gonna be kind of all about like COVID and shit.
Uh,
yeah, they say
So,
yeah,
it's anti-MAGA for sure. So
cool. That's great.
yeah,
I think that director is one of my favorite, and the stuff he's done is insane, and I hope he delivers for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Now I love that new subgenre almost of like horror that attacks those things. Like Red State is another one as well. Kevin Smith's Red
yeah,
State, if you haven't
it's a
seen
good
that,
one.
but that was one that they tried to bury for so long, and now it's finally like streaming on Amazon Prime again and stuff. So it's nice to see it get some love. Uh, but yeah, of course, feel free to shout out anything else you can think of, or just any other topics you want to speak of. But if not, we have a wrap up question, another hypothetical one to end on. Didn't you have a hypothetical one for us this time, Stephen?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I know like in the last episode that you did with Tim, he kind of asked like what movies would you score and this and that.
Mm.
And I thought this would be kind of a fun question, just knowing that you're like a gear dude and like playing not just like typical stuff. Like if you had to use a piece of music gear, either as a villain or fighting some kind of evil, like what would it be? Like, is it, like some crazy, guitar pedal that explodes a brain or some shit like that? Like, what would be your weapon and what kind of gear would it be?
Huh. Fuck, that's an interesting question. It made me think of the Mad Max franchise with the guitar player
Oh
who
yeah, fuck yeah. On the with the fire and shit.
which I'll okay, that character I think is kind of dumb. But Nick Zinner, my friend Nick Zinner played guitar in the film like as the thing, and that's fucking
Oh,
sick. I'm
sick.
so glad that I like know someone that's associated with that. But I feel like it just seemed kind of like again, it's like, oh, you're just strapped to the thing, you're playing guitar. Like if I was that person, I'd be like, we're going to fucking war and people are dying and I'm playing guitar. Like that
Check
sounds
out
dumb.
these riffs.
Yeah. And the obvious thing that they could have done was just like have some kind of way to like have the brown note and like have people start shitting their pants or something. Like, there's like things that are sonically capable of happening with war or with whatever like violence. And I think that that would be cool. Like, yeah, I mean, if you want to go like the trauma route or like the cheesy like kind of campy stuff, like it's some kind of effects pedal that's so jarring that like your ears explode or your brains come blow out or whatever, something like
Mhm.
that. But like yeah, that'd be rad to make everyone just start shitting their pants with my guitar. Fucking sick, you know? So, um,
That's sick.
yeah, I guess there's that.
I love it.
It'd be cool to have a riff that does like the same effect as like a Fulci film. Which one is it where the girl's like insides just start falling out of her mouth and stuff?
Oh, City of the Living Dead, where she just
Yeah.
starts
Yeah.
throwing up her insides. Yeah, it's so good.
Just like the face melts in a riff. But no, the brown note bass sounds like a good idea. Just fucking
Brown
a
note
bass
bass. Oh
slapping
my
the
God.
brown note.
They already have a
Sub,
fart pedal, I
sub.
think, out
Yeah.
there.
Those just are kind of dumb. But I mean,
Yeah,
it'd be funny to like, it'd be great if like the fart pedal made fart smells, maybe, you know. Yeah. I don't one of my bandmates, I guess, has the fart pedal and it's sort of like a one trick pony,
sure.
but you know.
Oh, I keep joking with one of my friends that I really want a guitar pedal that does, but in a musical way that does like the 90s like hanging Halloween ghost sound effect, you know, the like woo, you know, but do it in a way that's like actually feedback. I guess like a theremin kind of does that, but
Yeah.
like something that does more like just obnoxious feedback that you can use that also isn't just a like you hit one note and it doesn't really do anything musically. But
Yeah. Or like vibrato. I mean, there are pedals that will emulate a theremin. There's also like the Earthquaker Devices has an organizer pedal, which is like just an
mm,
organ, which sounds pretty spooky and cool.
Hmm.
There's also I use these Line 6 FM4 pedals that has like a backwards synth. So it's like
mhm.
so if you hit a note, it's like it like swoops backward. I don't know how to explain it. Anyhow, it sounds like you're playing like if you play a riff that's staccato,
Mhm.
it'll sound like you're playing the riff backwards, like
Yeah, it's like a reverse
yeah,
effect.
that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. So,
Yeah,
but that doesn't really like get into the horror realm as far as like
sure.
The Black
creating.
Lodge, some Twin Peaks shit in there.
Yeah, but I mean, like I looked at like the question, like what could I do that would be like my weapon or like
Mm,
Yeah.
that I'm gonna like inflict pain on humans or whatever. So
sure. Well, there's something funny about like thinking of like almost like a whammy pedal, you know? Like it's like you just keep going and going and going
oh
with
yeah,
it. It just like gets so piercing that it just like starts exploding heads or something. But
that would be great. I'm sure like that might exist in a film or
yeah.
you know. Um, yeah, that'd be cool.
Oh
Hell
yeah.
yeah.
Well, hell yeah. I appreciate you for joining us and sharing everything today, man. It's been a blast chatting with you and having you back on the show.
Of course, you guys are awesome.
Oh yeah.
Appreciate it. It's been super fun. Thank you.
Cool.
And of course, I'll make sure to link everything, as many of the links as I can, for 31G, all the bands and, the Cult and Culture podcast and everything down in the description. Also, a link to the documentary as well. Of course, for anybody listening, if you're on YouTube, just make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, letting us know some of your favorite horror sequels. And if you're on any of the other platforms, just make sure you leave a rating and subscribe. Thank you all for joining us and stay safe.
Thank you.
See ya.